Okay, so do you all remember how to do, like, this is actual long division from like 3rd grade, maybe 4th grade, maybe 3rd grade, I don't know. Okay, so I'm just gonna practice a couple questions with you. See if you remember. Go ahead.
No, I don't have this packet.
Oh, well, we can fix that. Okay, so see if you guys remember how to divide here. It's a 1, she says. Okay. Oh, you're already done. Okay, so all you gotta do, you just look at the first digit, you say, okay, how many times does 4 go into 6? And then you tell me 1, hopefully. Then you do 1 times the number on the outside there, so 1 times 4 is 4. And then when you do this process, once you get that lined up, you subtract. So I'm just gonna take 6 minus 4, which is 2. Then y'all bring down the next digit in the number. And then you just repeat that. So you say, okay, how many times does 4 go into 21? 5. So then I put a 5 at the top. 5 times 4 is 20. And I subtract that and I get 1. And I bring down the next number, which is 8. And then how many times does 4 go into 18? 4. And then 4 times 4 is 16. And if I subtract that, I'll get 2. Now 4 doesn't go into 2, right? So what is the 2? The remainder. Oh, you guys know this already. Okay. Remainder 2. Okay, so my answer there would be 154, remainder 2. Okay, now just to explain this really quickly. What that means, like this is my answer, right? Oh, my pen died. It's right there. That's my answer, right? Okay, what it means though is that if I take 4 times 154, I would do that, but I would have to add 2 to get that to be 618. That's what that means. So if I divide by a number, whatever my answer is, I'd have to multiply those two together, and if you have a remainder, you'd have to add the remainder. Okay, now I just want to show you one other thing. There's just a couple questions that ask you this, and sometimes people prefer this in this format, so I'm going to show you this today. Another way to write this answer is 154, and then instead of just writing remainder 2, you would write the remainder, which is 2, over what you're dividing into the number, which would be 4, which this is not my most perfect example because that could be reduced. So that would be 154 and a half, because I can reduce it. But that is another way to write the remainder. Some of the questions are going to ask you to just write remainder and then just put like 2 like I did there. Or if you put the remainder over what you're dividing, that could be simplified a little bit further. We're going to do this a little bit more with the polynomials, but that's just another way you can write the remainder instead of writing like R or whatever. Okay, now if I have a 2-digit number, like I've got 21, that doesn't go into 6, so you just scooch over and you say, okay, how many times does 21 go into 67? 3. So then put 3 on top. 3 times 21 is 63. Subtract this. This would be 4. Bring down the 2. How many times does 21 go into 42? 2. Now, if you do this, 2 times 21 is 42. So there's no remainder there. So my answer would just be 32. And what that means is 21 times 32, bless you, is 672. Okay, now I'm just going to write a little note for both of these. Now, if you have a remainder, all right, bless you, that means I had a remainder. So that means 4 is not a factor of 618 because there was a remainder there, right? This one means 21 is a factor of 672 because that divided in evenly. I didn't have a remainder. So there's a couple questions that are going to ask you if something's a factor. So if you have a remainder, it's not a factor. If you don't have a remainder, then it is a factor because it divides in evenly. Okay, now don't freak out. I'm just going to scooch this up. We're going to do this with some letters. No big deal. It's the same process. Okay, now you're probably looking at this going, garbage. No, it's not bad, I promise. Okay, I'm going to grab a highlighter because there's some different ways to do this, but I found this worked pretty decent. Okay, so you are going to look at the first term in each of these polynomials. So I'm going to take x minus 5 and I'm going to divide that into x squared plus 2x minus 30. Okay, so you don't, like, I used to just cover the rest of this up, so just don't even look at that for a second. Just look at the x, don't look at the negative 5 for a second. What would you multiply x by to turn it into x squared? X. X. Okay, so you're just asking, what do I multiply this by to get this? And so it would just be x. Okay, now this works like regular long division. You're going to take this and you're going to multiply it by both of these guys outside. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. And I'm just lining it up under the like terms. Just like regular division, we're going to subtract between these steps. And if you've done this correctly, that first term should go away. But the tricky part here, you got to subtract both of these terms. Okay, so x squared minus x squared, that's nothing. That should go away. Now, I literally like make myself touch this with a pencil. So this would be like 2x minus a negative 5x. So minus a negative here. This is really 2x plus 5x because it's minus a negative. So this is going to turn into 7x. Now, if we had a number, we'd bring down the next digit. If you have a polynomial, you just bring down the next term, which is that negative 30. And then I'm just going to repeat that process. I'm going to say, okay, what would you, and just look at the first term, what would you multiply x by to turn it into 7x? 7. Okay, so just up here, just going to put plus 7. You do 7 times x, that's 7x. 7 times negative 5 is negative 35. And you're going to subtract 7x minus 35, we're going to subtract that from the polynomial right above it. Now, 7x minus 7x, nothing, gone. Now, again, I make myself touch the subtraction sign because I'll forget. So this is negative 30 minus a negative 35. So it's really negative 30 plus 35. So this is 5. Okay. Does x go into 5? No. Okay, so in this case, this is your remainder right here. 5 is your remainder. Okay, so I'm just going to slide this up just a little bit. So 2 ways to write my answer. You could just put x plus 7, remainder 5, or if you write that other format, it would be x plus 7, and then instead of writing r5, the remainder was positive 5, so I can write that as plus 5 over, and then you just, whatever's outside that you were dividing in, the x minus 5. Both of those are correct. Now, what does this mean? Let me scooch this up just a teeny tiny bit again. These are my answers here. What it means is if I would take x minus 5 and FOIL or box that up with x plus 7, I would have to add 5 at the end, and that would give me back what was underneath the division sign. That's what that means. These are the actual answers because I'm just dividing right there, but that's what it means. If you have a remainder, it's not a factor. So like this doesn't divide in evenly. It's not a factor, but I can still do the division. Is anybody having a question? Okay, let me switch this down. You don't have to write all that garbage out. I just want like either x plus 7 remainder 5 or x plus 7 with the remainder 5 over x minus 5. Then you're good. Now, this beauty here is just written in a little different format. So I've got this lovely polynomial that starts with 18x cubed divided by 9x to the 4th. I would just recommend, I'm going to rewrite it in the format with the question next to it. Whatever's on the bottom would go on the outside, and whatever's underneath would go under your division symbol. So I'm just copying that down. Same process, it's just sometimes it's presented in that format versus the other. And then I'm just going to ask you some questions about this. All right. What would you multiply 9x by to get 18x to the 3rd? Bless you. Go ahead.
2x squared.
2x squared. Okay, so we're going to put 2x squared on top. Okay, now 2x squared gets multiplied by both of those guys on the outside. So 2x squared times 9x is 18x to the 3rd, which is what we want. Those match up. Excuse me. All right, 2x squared times 4 going to give me 8x squared. Now, again, remember, you are subtracting here. All right, so 18x squared minus 18x squared gone. Now, this is negative 64 minus a positive 8. So it would really just be negative 64 minus 8. Negative 64 minus 8 is going to give you negative 72x squared. And then I am just going to bring down the next term in that polynomial, which is negative 77x. Yes, ma'am.
Would like this. No,
It's tricky. So like think about if you distributed that as subtraction symbol, that would make this negative, that would make this negative. So it's negative 64 minus 8. So it's going to get more negative. Okay, once you're there, then you just look at that first term after you did that subtraction. What would you multiply 9x by to get negative 72x squared? Say what? 8x? Negative, yeah, it's tricky. You're just lying all over them. Okay, so to get the you just do a minus. So I'm going to use negative 8x. All right, so that'll give me the negative 72. Okay, now this will look a little different than the last question because we haven't had one that looked like this yet. But negative 8x times 9x is negative 72x squared. That matches up. Negative 8x times 4 is negative 32x. I don't know why I just like saying that in weird, whatever. Okay, negative, now, minus to negative. This is really negative 72 plus 72, so that's gone, which it should be. Now, negative 77 minus a negative 32 is really negative 77 plus 32. Miss Cardi doesn't have a calculator up here. I think it's a 45. Okay. But it should be negative. So negative 77 plus 32 is negative 45x. And again, I'm just going to bring down, excuse me, the next term in that polynomial, which is negative 20. All right, goal to get through the next question without coughing. Okay, what would you multiply 9x by to get negative 45x? Negative 5, right? All right, so negative 5 up here. Negative 5 times 9x is negative 45x. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. It is perfect, isn't it? There is no remainder here. Okay, so what my answer to the question is literally just what I have on top here, the 2x squared minus 8x minus 5. If I don't have a remainder, and you don't have to write any of this, but what that would mean is 9x plus 4 is a factor because I don't have a remainder. If it divides in evenly, that means it's a factor. So no remainder there. Is anybody having a question? Okay, I secretly love doing this way too much. Sorry. All right. I love, okay, whatever. It's my damage in life. All right. Now, there's a couple questions that are going to ask you just to determine if something is a factor. Okay, so I kind of was mentioning this on the front, but I'm just going to write on the top here a little bit. If your remainder is 0, then that means whatever you divided in is a factor. If your remainder is anything that is not 0, so if it's a number, it could be an expression, it could be anything. If your remainder is not 0, you are not a factor because it doesn't divide in evenly if it has a remainder. So if your remainder is anything besides 0, this is not going to be a factor. If it is 0, then it is a factor. That means it divides in evenly. So you'll see a couple questions like this that they just say something like this one does. Determine if x plus 4 is a factor. So this is literally a yes or no question. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to set this up. So I'm going to see if I divide x plus 4 into x squared plus 6x plus 8. I'm going to see if I can do that without a remainder. So first question, what would you multiply x by to get x squared? Just x. All right, so then that gets multiplied by both guys on the outside. So it'd be x squared plus 4x. And we're going to subtract. X squared minus x squared, gone. 6x minus 4x is 2x. And then go ahead and bring down your next term in the polynomial, which is 8. And then I'm just going to ask you that question again. just looking at the first term of each, what would you multiply x by to get 2x? 2. 2 times x is 2x. Guess what? 2 times 4 is 8. My remainder is 0 here. So my answer to the question, this is a factor. It divides in evenly. There's no remainder. Okay, so for this question, I'm going to say different polynomials. So is x plus 4 going to divide into x cubed plus 3x squared minus 6x minus 7. So I want to see if I can do this. Now, what would you multiply? Just looking at the first term, what would you multiply x by to get x cubed? X squared. So x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times 4 is going to be 4x squared. And we're going to subtract every time here. So x squared minus x squared, cubed, I can't read. X cubed minus x cubed is 0. Now, 3x squared is positive, minus 4x squared is going to be negative 1, or just negative x squared there. Bring down your next term, which is negative 6x. And then I'm just going to ask you, what would you multiply x by to get negative x squared? And when we need an x too. Yeah, negative 1x. All right, so negative x times x, negative x squared. Negative x times 4 is negative 4x. All right, so I'm going to subtract here. Failed my goal, I coughed. Okay, negative 6x minus a negative 4 would be really negative 6 plus 4, so this is going to be negative 2x. Bring down your next term. Okay, now, you might be able to tell right at this point. The question is just, is this a factor? Can you tell, am I going to have a remainder here? Yes, you will. So if you wanted to stop right then and there and be like, this is not a factor because I know I'm going to have a remainder, that's totally fine with me. I'm just going to finish it out real quick. To get this to divide for, or what multiplies to x to get negative 2x, you'd put negative 2 here. This would become negative 2x, and then it would be minus 8. And that would end up giving us a remainder of 1. So it doesn't divide in evenly anytime I have a remainder. But if you can notice that before you get going through the problem, you can just stop because it's just a yes or no question. If you will have a remainder, your answer is no. If you don't have a remainder, your answer is yes. Okay, is anybody having a question? Okay, now, I just have two kind of like special cases, if you will, at the bottom of the page. Now, I will tell you this sometimes is necessary and sometimes is not. It just kind of depends on the question. But if you guys notice my example 3 here, it says divide where I'm missing a power of x. So like I have x to the 4th, but I don't have an x cubed, and I have an x squared, but I don't have an x. So just do this for me, just to help yourself, and it'll make sense in a second. But to make it easier to make sure I can line up like terms, what I would recommend, if you're missing a power of x, I'm just going to replace it real quick. So I have this x to the 4th. I don't have an x cubed, so I'm going to put in that I don't have an x cubed by just writing plus 0 x cubed. It's not adding anything. This is just going to help you with the placement when you do the subtraction. And sometimes it's needed and sometimes it's not, but I would recommend just get in the habit of putting it in there because most of the time it makes the problem easier to do. I do have a term with x squared, so just go ahead and copy that, negative 3x squared. I don't have a term with a plain x, so I'm going to represent that by saying I don't have any x's by saying plus 0x. And then I have a nice constant there as negative 10. I've already had too many cough drops today. I can't have any more. Okay. What would you multiply x by to get x to the 4th? X to the 3rd, x cubed. Yes, I heard both. Both correct. All right. X cubed times x is x to the 4th. Now this is going to make sense. X cubed times negative 2x is, or just negative 2, I'm sorry, negative 2x cubed. And because I put that 0x cubed in there, that's going to help me subtract a little bit better, because otherwise I would be missing some like term to combine that with. Now, this is going to be 0 minus a negative 2, so it's really 0 plus 2. So this would come down as 2x cubed, and I'll just go ahead and bring down that next term. All right, and then we just repeat the process. Just look at the first thing. What do you need to multiply x by to get 2x cubed, or 2x cubed, yeah. 2x squared, so plus 2x squared. And then we're just going to multiply that by both guys on the outside. So 2x cubed, and then 2x squared times negative 2 is going to be negative 4x squared. Subtract. All right, now this is negative 3 minus a negative 4, so it's negative 3 plus 4. So this would be 1, or just x squared. And just to help me out, I'm going to bring down that 0x. What would you multiply x by to get x squared? Just x, so we're going to put plus x here. X times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. And just putting that 0 in there, 0x, is just helping me do kind of like a place value. 0 minus a negative 2 is really 0 plus 2, so this would simplify to be 2x. Bring down your negative 10. And then last step here, what am I going to multiply x by to get 2x? 2. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Subtract. And let's see if I can scooch this up a little bit. All right, so negative 10 minus a negative 4 is going to be negative 10 plus 4, which is negative 6. Okay, now I know I'm going to go off the screen, but I'm going to write this down. So 2 ways to write your answer. So I could write the x cubed plus 2x squared plus x plus 2, and I could just write out remainder negative 6. The other format is to write down that x cubed plus 2x squared plus x plus 2, and then instead of writing remainder, to write this as an expression, since this is negative 6, I'm just going to write minus. And then you put the remainder, which is that 6 over whatever you were dividing into your polynomial, which is x minus 2. Okay? Those are 2 different ways to write the same thing. Does anybody have any question? I'm going to do one more here. Now, the last one, I have just kind of like a higher power of x on the outside. So it's x squared plus 4. And this one's going to be kind of weird as we go through it. So I'm going to go ahead and put x squared plus 4 on the outside, the denominator there. I've got 4x to the 4th plus 5x cubed plus 10x squared plus, oh my gosh, this is long, 20x minus 20. Now this problem is a little bit weird because I have an x squared and then I have a 4. I don't have a term with an x. I would not, in this case, recommend putting a missing power of x on the outside. I would only recommend that to you on the inside. So we're going to show you how to work through this one. All right, what would you multiply x squared by to get 4x to the 4th? 4x squared. Okay, now this is going to be weird when we do this. So 4x squared times x squared gives you 4x to the 4th. But when I do 4x squared times 4, that's going to be 16x squared. So what I would tell you to do in that case, I'm just going to put that under the other term that had the x squared. So this is kind of weird. Okay, now when I do my subtraction, 4x to the 4th minus 4x to the 4th, gone. I have this 5x cubed and nothing to subtract from it, so you have to just go ahead, it'd be like minus 0, so I'm just going to bring it down to the next, to the next line. And then 10x squared minus here 16x squared, because this would just be positive. So it's 10 minus 16. This would be minus 6x squared. And then I'm going to go ahead and just bring down the next term, which is the plus 20x. Okay, now, once you're there, just look at that first term. It's 5x cubed. What would you multiply x squared by to turn it into 5x cubed? 5x. So plus a 5x here. 5x times x squared is 5x to the 3rd. 5x times 4 is going to give you 20x. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up with the other term with the x. When you do the subtraction here, this is negative 6 x squared minus nothing. So just keep that as negative 6x squared. And this is actually kind of weird here, but 20x minus 20x is going to actually cancel right there. So I'll just bring down that last term, but I'm going to kind of line it up a little bit closer, so the negative 20. All right, to finish this guy out, what would you multiply x squared by to get negative 6x squared? Negative 6. Okay, so negative 6x squared, negative 6 times 4 is negative, 24. So I am going to have a remainder here. This is not a factor. I've got negative 20 minus the negative 24. So negative 20 plus 24 is 4. So, man, I just have giant handwriting. Okay, so 2 ways to write the answer. I could write 4x squared plus 5x minus 6, and then I could indicate remainder 4. Or if I do that other format where I don't write out the remainder, I would write it, since it's positive 4, I just write plus 4 over, and then the x squared plus 4 doesn't divide in, well, not on the screen, doesn't divide into that, but it's just the remainder over the divisor. If the remainder ends up being a negative, you would just put subtraction here. If it ends up being a positive, you just put a plus here. Those are two different ways to write that.